After a few delays, the sharkopaths have made it to the Bay of Bengal. This is an area that saw some of the fiercest fighting in the hybrid war, as everyone was sending their hybrids here to challenge Vex, only for her to just suddenly leave and create a big mess in their wake, leaving the sharkopaths to clean up this mess, since nobody else would. Now there are a lot of hybrids to challenge here, but the first one to challenge is one of the more infamous ones. Whilst Vex never got to fight any of the hybrids in the Bay of Bengal, there was a couple of hybrids that were in contention for this spot, one of which was Vlad, this giant swordfish fish thing created by Cheese Cad 2. Unfortunately, the original ended up losing its battle with the other combatant Hydractis, a giant jellyfish, but Vlad was reborn as Vlad 2.0, similar to Dracocetus, and it seems like the creator, whether intended to or not, is now getting dragged into a battle with the sharkopaths. So how does the 2.0 stack up to Bruce? And more importantly, is it an improvement on the original? In my opinion, honestly, it's not. Now this is going to work similar to the Cthulhu whale last time, in which, because there are a lot of contributors in Vlad this time, 14 in total, so I can't focus on each one individually, and instead I've grouped them into categories. So starting with the first contributor being Black Marlin for the base, which is a very good base. I chose it for my very first aquatic hybrid Leppy, so it definitely works as a base, giving a creature a useful weapon in its giant sword nose, as well as a streamlined body, ready for speed. Speed alone's not enough to win fights, so Vlad's size has been increased with the Tylosaurus to 45 feet and 5.5 tons in length. In weight. Now, these stats are, well, they're definitely big, but unfortunately they probably wouldn't be very possible, since for Tylosaurs, those are related to mosasaurs, and even the biggest mosasaurs didn't seem to grow longer than around 40 feet, so the addition of the extra feet doesn't really seem possible, especially as well as the whole weight situation, but we'll get to that in time. Now for intelligence, Vlad has gone for a combination of both orca and bottlenose dolphin, so not only for intelligence but also for that echolocation. Unfortunately, when looking at Vlad's design, there is something missing, and that is the actual space for the echolocating organs. Usually they would be located in the head, similar to Vex, which also creates kind of a big weak spot for the hybrid. But even then, Vlad's has a very streamlined and slim body, including the head, so if the echolocating organs are actually there, they're going to be pretty squished, which means it's going to be even a bigger weakness for the sharkopaths to ram into. On top of that, I don't really understand the point of creators adding multiple contributors for a single thing. Like, why was there the need to add both orca and bottlenose dolphin for intelligence and echolocation, when one would have just suited fine? Preferably bottlenose dolphin, since their intelligence is above orcas. Now, in terms of the hybrid's toxin resistance, there are 3 contributors that contribute to this. The green sea turtle, providing its unique throat and strong stomach. The southern pufferfish, which provides Vlad with toxic meat. And the bearded goby, which provides further toxic resistance due to bearded gobies being able to survive jellyfish stings. Now, the green sea turtle was a very creative addition for this, and it definitely works, but it may end up conflicting with other factors which we'll get into later. The southern pufferfish, a unique addition for its toxic flesh, because pufferfish contain tetrodotoxin, one of the worst toxins that there is. One pufferfish alone is enough to kill 30 people. But, unfortunately, this toxic meat won't have much effect on the sharkopaths, because tiger sharks are known to eat pufferfish, So considering they can ingest the tetrodotoxin, it's likely that it won't have much effect on them thanks to their strong immune systems. Vlad has poisonous meat similar to them, but they use different creatures for this poisonous meat. My hybrids use Greenland shark, which in my opinion actually works better since not only does it provide toxic meat, but it also provides a natural deterrent to stop creatures from taking a bite out of it. See, the thing with the sharkopaths is that, and sharks in general, is that they don't really have a traditional way to dispose of their waste, so a lot of their urine ends up getting concentrated in their bodies. Thus, the sharkopaths smell like pee, to put it bluntly, which also contributes a lot to their toxic meat. So Vlad probably might engage in a possible gag reflex if he tries to take a bite out of them, because they will likely reek of pee. The situation would be even worse in freshwater, because thanks to the bull shark contributors that allow them to survive in freshwater, they do so, but they also end up peeing like crazy when they're in freshwater, up to 20 times their normal rate, which is to flush out the extra water. Now, back to the other contributors. The bearded gobies addition for toxin resistance. Great on paper, not so good in execution, because I had actually never heard about this little guy before I actually saw the video for Vlad, and looking back, I know why. It's because it doesn't actually do that much. I looked it up and bearded gobies actually aren't immune to venom. They merely evolved these kinds of traits to survive in their low oxygen environments that they inhabit. Vlad, as far as I'm aware, doesn't live in those environments, so there'd be no need for him to evolve these kinds of traits. So therefore, he likely wouldn't actually have them. So therefore, the bearded goby doesn't really provide anything, and it's probably just another wasted slot. Moray eel was added for its teeth, and it also works well with the black marlin due to them both having streamlined bodies designed for weaving around tight spaces. Although the teeth on the moray eel, they are good at grabbing things, but they are fairly brittle. And combining that with the sea turtle throat could lead to some issues, because in case you didn't know, moray eels actually can't open their mouths until they swallow whatever they've bitten down on. Now, I'm not saying that Vlad has that problem, because he only takes the teeth and not the actual jaws themselves, but those teeth combined with the sea turtle throat could mean that larger prey could end up getting stuck. In addition to that, the moray eel's teeth may not be the best for penetrating tough armour, because while the sharkopath's denticles are far from the best armour, they're far from the worst either, and they can be relatively tough. Here's another creative creature that was in the genome, the giant needlefish, which ends up adding modifications to the actual head itself, making it less of a swordfish marlin-like head, and more of a head with an actual jaw attached to it with teeth, because billfish don't actually have teeth. It actually works better this way because they wouldn't be wasting energy trying to swing around a giant sword nose. In addition to this, the streamlined body also works very well, and it's also combined well with the next contributor. The short fin mako was added to improve the hybrid speed, but not in the way that I was expecting. In the video, it specified that it was only really added because of its streamlined body and for better acceleration. However, that's not the reason why short fin makos are fast. I mentioned this in the Bruce video, but the reason short fin makos sharks can get faster than other sharks is due to two reasons. One is that they're actually warm-blooded, which allows them to recover stamina better. Vlad wasn't mentioned to be warm-blooded, so it's likely still a cold-blooded fish. And the other one, the big one, is their size. Because short fin makos are less than half the size of Vlad, and yet we're expected to believe that Vlad can reach the same speeds. That's just not how things work. A larger creature won't be getting just as fast as a much smaller creature, especially with the way Vlad's fins are designed, but we'll get to that in a second. Something I just forgot to mention was that the mako shark also provides denticles, which are also hardened through the use of arapaima, which works pretty well, but I feel like arapaima at this point is becoming a little overused. Now, the final category of animals are ones that just don't make sense of why they were added. First of all being the Basilosaurus to provide air-breathing abilities. This is the same problem that Cioella had, and even argue that Vex has, but the opposite way around. Cioella was already an air breather that tried to implement gills. Vlad probably already has gills, and is now trying to incorporate air-breathing abilities. Short answer for this, you can't exactly have both abilities, because that could cause possible complications. You could end up taking in water through one or the other, and it could lead to you drowning. Which probably wouldn't be very good, and also wouldn't make for a very interesting battle. Now, the final two contributors are damselfish and big-eye tuna. The reasoning being to provide additional fins. However, these fins cause a lot more problems than they do answers. To better explain why the fins on Vlad are an issue, let's take a look at Bruce's fins. Their fins end up coming from the sailfish, which is pretty similar to the black marlin. Their fins are long and thin, which means they're also pretty strong, perfectly designed for helping to propel them through the waters. Vlad's fins, on the other hand, seem to be a mishmash of the black marlin's giant collapsible sail, the large spiny fins on the end from the big-eye tuna, the back fin from the giant needlefish, and the front fins from, I presume, the damselfish. This mishmash of fins don't exactly work well because the extra fins will lead to more drag since they are much larger than the extra fins that other fish would possess. In addition, their shape would also encounter more water resistance as they would push against the water, especially with the tail. The tail on sharks and billfish are sort of like a crescent shape. They don't actually hit much water when they're being used, which allows them to move quickly through the water. Vlad's tail is much more paddle-like, and the best way I could describe it is if it was like rowing a boat, because this might aid in power, but it wouldn't actually aid in propulsion, because the tail would be hitting a lot of water as it would weigh its way, which means Vlad will have to work harder to move. So, I think that's pretty much all the things that Vlad has, so let's get down to the fight. After making it to the Bay of Bengal, the sharkopaths separate into smaller groups, looking to hunt down a lot of the rogue hybrids that are around the area. A group of 5 of them end up encountering Vlad as he's hunting a school of fish. Vlad, with his echolocation, is able to detect them and rushes in at one of them. Tries to bite them with his jaws, but the sharkopath moves it away and his tail ends up hitting Vlad's face. Vlad ends up turning around to try again, only for one of the sharkopaths to start biting into his sail. As Vlad desperately tries to shake it off, which he succeeds, but end up losing a piece of the sail in the process, another sharkopath rams him in the top of the head. This ends up greatly hurting Vlad, as he stumbles around aimlessly until eventually he regains focus and ends up actually managing to bite one of the sharkopaths. His teeth seemingly struggling to penetrate through the skin, which ends up causing the sharkopath to break free but has caused grave injuries. Another sharkopath ends up biting onto his tail fin, followed by another on one of his lower fins. For Vlad, the numbers seem to be proving much more an issue than they originally thought, and its increased size means a decrease in speed, which means he's unable to keep up with them. One of the sharkopaths does end up succumbing to its injuries and bleeding to death, as well as another that got a bit too careless and ended up getting impaled right through the gills. It was thanks to its giant nose. But eventually, the remaining sharkopaths end up managing to bite off various parts, their teeth being especially designed to chomp through armour, and the poisonous meat having little to no effect on them. Eventually, Vlad just becomes another meal for the pack. Now, this video wasn't just dunking on Vlad, because Vlad is still an effective hybrid. Although there are a few features that Cheese Cat 2 could implement to make him better, my advice for him is to fully commit to the Balefish build, and, well, commit to one or the other, strength or speed, because trying to have both without the right modifications is pretty difficult. The sharkopaths are able to manage it, and even then, they're only around as big as Vex. So the advice would probably be to fully commit to the speed build, or to reduce the creature's size, as well as giving it the correct fins in order to allow it to better move through the waters, because there are definitely some unique features in this. The addition of the giant needlefish to implement the head, and the green sea turtle for its immune system, it works, but there is a lot of different creatures in Vlad's genome, perhaps a little too many, which could lead to a final issue in Vlad. He might not be all that congruent. Due to having lots of different animals in the genome, and yet they may not mix very well, it could lead to conflicting instincts, but then again, I'm not a professional biologist by any stretch of the matter, so what would I know? Except I feel like I do know more than the average person. So, because the hybrid war is something that I've taken very seriously. Stupid neighbours! Sorry about that, guys. You want to know why there's such a random, giant stretch of time between the videos? That's why. Crazies like that in our street. Seriously, no joke, someone got arrested recently around our street because they had 4 handguns hidden in their coat. We live in Britain. Where did they even get those from? Yeah, things just end up popping off all the time around here, so video production is kind of difficult to do. So I'm just going to end it off here. The sharkopaths are victorious. Vlad probably needs to have an upgrade for the 3.0, and in the meantime, I'll be looking into big projects for Halloween, because Project Cronus is unlike a lot of the other things that we've seen before. It's a true monster that is going to wipe out pretty much everything in its path. So keep an eye out for that video, because it's going to be crazy.